Welcome to the Startup Grind.
I think many of you know Mary Norton, and I'm going to let Jeremy make Mary's introduction in a few minutes, but I want to thank you again for coming to kind of it's really our second event. We moved to this month. Last month we had Dig South and everything else going on, and I recognize some of the faces here. One of the things that we thought about was there's a market growing really globally between fashion and technology. And over the next 3 months, we're gonna have entrepreneurs from the fashion industry, entrepreneurs from the tech industry next event, and then the following event we're going to talk about could Charleston support a convergence of both fashion and technology. You know, there are two different worlds where fashion has to be fashionable. I mean, I don't think anybody want to walk around with a clunky technology device on. But there's a lot of artists, a lot of fashion people, a lot of technologists, entrepreneurs in the region. And I think also the government, the local government, state government, is really hopping on board and creating programs that help entrepreneurs. So we'll be exploring that and going from there. So thanks for coming. We're going to talk about fashion in this event, and very lucky to have Mary here. I think she's probably been Mary has been very successful in the fashion industry, and I'm sure that everybody will be able to gain some knowledge on her experiences and her successes. And from there, I'll let you introduce Mary.
Yeah, so Mary does not need much of an introduction. I'm sure if you're here today, you most likely have heard of her. But what she did was she started a fashion line in 1998 called Moo Roo that grew into an international success right from her kitchen in Charleston. So today we're going to talk about the trials and tribulations of starting a company. We're going to talk about how she raised money, how she started multiple companies, and how she's been very generous and has figured out how to connect the philanthropic efforts into the vein and the core existence of her companies. So can we get a Startup Grind welcome and thank Mary Norton for coming in. All right, Mary, thanks for joining us today. These things are easy.
Okay.
Good. The way we like to start out is we like to hear a little bit about where you came from. Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? What did you think you were going to be when you grew up in the early years?
Okay. I'm originally from Flagstaff, Arizona. My parents were both educators, a math professor and a superintendent of schools. Entrepreneurial ventures were definitely not part of the process in my home. Steady career, you know, you go get a steady career was the call of the day. I thought I was going to be a mortician. I don't know. Dead people didn't scare me. I actually was an apprentice at a mortuary, and it seemed like a steady business. I liked the cosmetic thing part of it, and dressing them up.
We got to work.
And I liked Scott Bagwell, who was the mortician's son, and I liked the hearses because they seemed really fancy. I thought they were like limousines, so it all seemed fancy to me. So Flagstaff's a small place, and so it seemed great until a movie came to Charleston, Flagstaff. A movie came called Vacation with Chevy Chase, and I was working at Black Bart Steakhouse as a singing waitress. I've had a really weird past, but I was a singing waitress, and Vacation, all the cast and crew would come all the time to Black Bart's where I was a singing waitress, and that was it. I was bit by the movie bug, and that made me decide I wanted to be in the movies, not in them, but work on them.
Great.
And so that's,
Yeah.
I'll just keep talking, so you have to shut it
No,
down.
you're good. This is where we want to go. So you went to ASU, you were a film major.
UNA, not ASU. That's the competition.
That's
I was
like
not a
that.
Sun
UA.
Devil, I was a Wildcat.
Research.
I was
So
a
you
Wildcat.
went to UA.
U of A.
U of A. Wildcat.
I was a Wildcat.
And also a film major? Did I get that
I
part
was
right?
a film major, and there was very few. They had just started the film program, so there were all 5 of us in the film program when it started. Me and Greg Kinnear were in the same class, and they really didn't know what to do with us. They just sort of set us loose and said, I don't know, just go do what you're going to do with some movie cameras and stuff. And I was again very fortunate that Revenge of the Nerds came and shot at the U of A campus.
Fantastic movie.
And yeah, and so I got a job on Revenge of the Nerds and had a great time.
Yeah.
And then the producer and director liked me so much that they asked if I could go do a work study over in Europe on the next movie that they did together, which was called Gotcha.
Okay.
And a terrible movie, but I got to go to Berlin and work on that movie next as part of my... So I actually had some movie credits by the time I had graduated, and Greg and I cheated on our marketing exam together. That's my claim to fame, and we got in big trouble. So, but we've very made friends over the years.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So at what point in your career then did you get the idea that you wanted to start your own company?
Never.
Never.
I didn't know I was... In fact, I thought entrepreneurs were like way too grown up and like fancy, not fancy, but like, I don't know, people with plastic pocket protectors, and that word was not ever in my vocabulary. That was not, I never.
So let's hear about how you stumbled upon it then.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Really stumbled. I was not, the only C I ever got in college, I always got A's, was in econ. And so business plans of business was never my track. It was have fun, make movies, play around, creative.
Always very creative.
Creative. However, I did end up in my movie career life on the business end of movies. I was a production coordinator. So inadvertently, I ended up in business even though I didn't think that was my forte. So the mix of creative and business was always in my blood without thinking it was. How I ended up creating a business was that I literally had a dream one night and ended up pursuing it. I was going through a rough time in my marriage and in life, and I'm a very prayerful and spiritual woman, and I went to bed and had a come to Jesus meeting with God and said, you know, what the hell are you doing? This is not what I expected in life. And I went to bed that night and had a dream that I was under this big oak tree and I was weaving these handbags out of flowers. Now, I was never a crafty person at all. In fact, I used to make fun of crafty people, and my best friend and I always said, if you ever find us at Michael's or anything, you have to shoot the other person down. Because that means you're starting to make those wreaths and stuff, and go to Cracker Barrel and things are wrong. Things have gone really wrong. So I don't know what happened. I couldn't shake this dream, and I was like, oh my God, this dream. And it was the first time I had felt really peaceful and joyous from this dream. And so I went to Steinmart and TJ Maxx and got these little evening bags. Now, I was not an evening bag person. I'd never had an evening bag. That was not my world. And I was a jeans person.
Yeah.
And I got these little evening bags, and I went to Lady Tess and asked her for her scraps on the floor, and just, I don't know, like sewed and glued some flowers on these bags to replicate what was in my dream. And I was going to give these bags to my best friends for presents. And my husband, Joe, came in and saw them. And because they were small, he's like, oh, those are cute little things for the kids, for like toddlers. because they have their size. And my babysitter at the time said, those are great. Let me take them into Stella Nova and see what happens. They all sold in 45 minutes. She called me and said, hey, make me some more. What's the name of this brand? And I was like, that's not a brand, that's just like shoe money. I'm going to go buy some vanilla Blahniks with that, you know. And she's the one who came up with the name Moo Roo, which was the nicknames of my two daughters, Micah and Riley.
Okay.
So that's how it started.
Wow. Literally
And
a dream.
literally a dream. And I mean, I can see exactly the dream to this day as though it was right here.
Yeah. And then where were you in terms of your career at that point?
I was a stay-at-home mom.
You were just working at home.
Yeah.
No, the movies were behind you at this point.
Yeah, when I got married, I quit the film business because nobody I knew was faithful of movies. And I was like, yeah, I don't really trust myself. I need to try keep it home.
Well, I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are sitting here today, and I spoke to some of them before who are starting fashion businesses of their own. And they're very interested to hear about those early stages in the company.
Yeah.
So you sold a few to a place where your babysitter brought
To Stella Nova, which was a spa. I mean, it was a spa. It was not a usual suspect at all. And I mean, the first woman who bought the first three now has probably 175 bags. She's collected them over the years. She probably has one of the biggest collections that exists, and believes that there are collectors, and I have many collectors. So it's unusual. It's an unusual thing. I really inadvertently started signing them because I didn't have a label. I started signing them and putting the year in them because I had no label. It wasn't like, wow, these are great pieces of art. I just had no label, and that turned out to be a golden thing.
Yeah.
And has now become a true mystery that people collect them as a year, a secondary market.
Yeah, it was very unique.
It is very
unique. People
unique.
really like that. So then what happened? You sold it to that first place.
The first place, and then a lady came in. It's all happenstance. A lady came in who was a buyer for a store called Copeland's that had 7 stores. And she came in for a massage, and she saw them and said, these would be great for our stores, and called me and said, I want to place an order for our 7 stores. And I thought, oh, I better call every TJ Maxx and Steinhardt and grab all the little evening bags they have. And that's really what I did in the whole area. And I told her these will all be different, you know, because I don't really know what I'm doing. And I didn't say that, but I just sort of went on a whim. I said, they're all one of a kind. And she said, great, that sounds awesome. And she said, what's the price point? I was like, I don't know. And I called Lauren, my babysitter, and said, how much should I price them for? And she said, I don't know, what do you think? And I said, oh, how about 150? And she said, that sounds good. And that was my big pricing strategy. There was no rhyme or reason. Then it started to get a little more serious because they started ordering.
How big was that first order?
It was probably about 90 pieces. I mean, and that was, 3 weeks into.
Yeah.
3
weeks after the dream.
3 weeks after the dream, and right after that, a friend of mine from Los Angeles came to town, and he was a property master in the film business with me, and he said, hey, let me take some of these back to LA, and just put them on some of our friends that are in the movie business, and it would be fun, We didn't really know that many celebrities. We knew mostly behind-the-scenes people. And the day before the Emmys, he's a really gay guy, very effusive. and he was coming out of the movie theater, and he happened to know Julia Louis-Dreyfus's manager, who was also coming out of the movie theater. And he said, "Oh, you know, what's Julia going to wear?" It turned out she was going to wear the very last Bob Mackie gown to go down the red carpet. And she was going to wear a Judith Lieber bag, which Judith Lieber, you're a guy you probably don't know, but is very famous. And my friend David said, "Oh, Lieber, so yesterday." And he said, "You need to put her in one of these bags my friend designs." And I was like, "Oh." So he showed her this bag that basically I had glued some flowers on, and from TJ Maxx, and the manager was like, "It'll look perfect." I'm like, "Yes." And so she ended up carrying this black bag with green orchids that really became a signature for me after that, and a pink bow down the red carpet from the Emmys. And you know what happens when you have a battery of photographers, they're all yelling at you saying, "Who did your gown? Who did your bag?" And she's like, "It just had my signature, but it didn't have a label." And she's like, "Moo something, Moo Roo." She didn't know it didn't have a label, nothing, you know. And you know, having been from behind the scenes, you don't know how important that celebrity endorsement is. So he called me and said, "She's wearing it." And I was like, "Ah, that's great, you know, that's nice." And then I was at the Harris Teeter maybe a week later and opened up People magazine, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I was showing all the little bag checkout guys and stuff, and I'm like, "That's mine!" And they're like, "Here it is." So, you know, they thought I was a stay-at-home mom. They didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy.
So was that the true inflection point in the company? Or brand?
That gave it a really good launch pad, because then I had some collateral. You know, I had something, and that particular stylist who put that on her used me for other celebrities. So, you know, he started using me, and, you know, he realized I could create things like that, you know, because he'd say, "Oh, so-and-so's going to wear a red gown, whip me up something," and I could just whip up something, whereas most designers, it takes, you know, months, because they're doing it out of Italy, etc. I mean, I was just making,
We're still at the kitchen table at this point.
yeah, I just whip something up, because, and he'd say, "I don't like it." Well, I could whip something else up. I'd run over to, you know, Lady Tess, or go to an antique store and grab a pin. You know, it cost me next to nothing. So, you know, well, I didn't know what it cost me. It didn't really matter.
So were you thinking at the time that this is a really efficient way to get the word out there? I want to become a celebrity.
No, I just was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun," you know.
Just having a good time creating personas.
I was like, "This is fun," and then waiting for a picture to show up, and I was like, "Ah, it's fun! Woo! Look at Harris Teeter!" You know, no, it wasn't. There was no forethought, no plan, no strategy, just whim. The first time it like sunk in, I was doing something, really creating a business, was when I cleaned out all TJ Maxx's and Steinmart's in the United States, pretty much. I mean, I could not find any more like evening bags really that didn't have crap all over them, because I just needed real basic bodies. And I had to really find some place to order, and you had to commit to volume, right, of a shape and a style. And I found this guy, Victor, and I had to commit to 50 bags of a color in a style. And I was like, "Oh shit, that's a lot of black evening bags in one shape and one." And I'm like, "I'm never gonna run through these. What the heck?" And I'm thinking, and they weren't very expensive, because they weren't great. They were okay. And I thought, oh my God, everybody I know is going to get this one satin evening bag for the rest of their lives for Christmas. You know, this is it. And I thought, and it was, I remember, I think it was like, I don't know, $400 or something. I'm thinking, I'm really like jumping off here.
Yeah.
Know?
And how long did it take to go through the 50?
Oh, no time.
No time at all?
No time. Because I went to my first trade show. I went to my first trade show in New York. This was, I started, the dream was in July of '97, and I went to my first trade show in January of '98.
Okay.
And I called the New York Chamber of Commerce and said, I heard y'all have fashion shows there. And I didn't know where to start. I don't know how to find a trade show. I didn't know how you got to that, you know. And they sent me to the Javits Center, and the Javits Center guy said, yes, we have these things. And it was, I think this was November. I was calling for a January show. Mm-hmm. And they had somebody, you know, get out of the show. It was a juried show, and he said, send me pictures, and I sent him like Polaroids via FedEx, because this is really before the internet. I mean, there wasn't as common to email or anything, and he called me and he said, well, send me $5,000 for a booth, and you can come. So I went to my husband and I said, can you lend me $5,000? And admittedly, Joe was like, listen, I'm going to give you this money just to show you. You can't just go off the cuff and decide you're going to start something. Mm-hmm. And basically, he thought he was giving me a very expensive trip to New York, and that I'd come back with a lesson well taught. Okay. And I showed up at that trade show with 150 samples, because I thought you just sold them there. I thought you sold the stuff like a flea market, basically. I didn't know that they took orders on the things, and it was interesting. I mean, people were asking for my Dun & Bradstreet number. I was like, I didn't even have a business license. I had nothing, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I didn't know how I had made even one of. I didn't know how I didn't have the recipe for any of the samples. I just made them and thought you just sold them. And I came back with $65,000 in orders that had to be made for March. So this was January. They had to be made by March. And
roughly how many bags is that?
A lot. But, you know, out of the 165 styles, there was probably 20 styles that really sold. Yeah. But, I mean, I had to figure out how to recreate those 20 styles, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I stole my husband's head cocktail waitress, Sean, because she was efficient and smart, and made her my head of production. And I got a warehouse on Folly Road, and got some lines of credit, which the banks made. Even though I had that collateral, they made my husband sign as a co-signer, and you know, used our house and everything as collateral. Which now I look back and think that wasn't right, because I had those orders, and they should have just used the orders as collateral. And I bled. I remember my fingers just bleeding from cutting flowers and cutting stuff, but I made every order, made those orders on time. Oh my God, it was, and I was like, I'll never do that again that way. And I learned, and made them on time, and created customers, and then I knew I had a business. Right. Had to get serious and couldn't be silly anymore.
So what was that next step like?
Next step was that I knew the show I was in wasn't really the right show. I knew I wasn't charging quite enough, because people kept saying you're not charging enough. I was like, okay. And even if if customers are telling me that they're not enough, then that's not right.
Yeah.
It was a great feeling, but a feeling of, my goodness, I'm really creating something here that I didn't really trust. I was like, why do people like this stuff so much? You know, I didn't trust my own creativity, and that process continued all the way through for a long time. That I didn't trust my creativity. Probably until the last few years that I didn't trust that.
How would you get over that?
It took losing my business and some really big personal things to trust that.
Yeah, but in terms of just keeping yourself creatively focused and to make bags that people love, when internally you have a struggle with that, how would you concentrate and keep going forward?
Ideas have never been my problem. Editing's been my problem, but ideas have never been an issue. But trusting my creativity has always been an issue, or had been an issue.
And then, stop for a second. I mean, all this sounds like a fairy tale.
It was. I mean, listen, Women's Wear Daily called it the Cinderella Story. It was a Cinderella story. It was bizarre. I mean, I ended up on the cover of the Bergdorf Goodman's Christmas catalog when I was gluing feathers on bags. I was like, are you freaking kidding me?
Was that an internal secret, or was that well known that you were...
I don't know. I think it was an internal secret. I was like, do they not look? I mean, I don't know. You know, I still can't figure it out. I'm like, huh?
In the first 2 or 3 years, what would you say was the biggest struggle that you had through this process?
It's always been finances. A creative mind is never the best of finances, and me and finances don't mix. We're just not friends.
Yeah, oil and water.
Yeah, we're not friendly together.
At any point, did you think on bringing a finance manager or a guy to run the business side?
Oh, yeah.
You would always want
Oh, yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Did that
I
happen?
had various financial people, but, you know, and I think many young entrepreneurs, this is the case, is you generally can't afford what you need. You need a real strategist financial person, and you generally can't afford what you truly need. And for me, also, I still didn't trust that I kind of knew a lot of what I was doing, but I didn't trust it.
Right.
I didn't trust myself very well. That I did have a real good head on my shoulders. I always thought somebody else knew a lot better than I did. Financially, I didn't know very well, but I did have really good instincts, and it wasn't until losing my business that I figured out that I really did know what I was doing all along.
And then how did you decide, if you rewind a little bit, to go from making bags just in your kitchen and selling them on individual orders to actually creating brick and mortar stores in a few different cities?
Well, the one city, Charleston, really we outgrew the warehouse. I mean, my God, I remember thinking when we got a 900 square foot warehouse, oh my God, we'll never use all this space. This space is crazy big. And I think it was within a year and a half, or maybe a year and a half, that we were busting at the seams. And then I just really knew that we needed a King Street retail store. I knew we needed to be on King Street because people were coming from King Street
To your warehouse?
to the crap little warehouse asking to come see stuff. And what really spurred that on was these silly sample sales we had, which were a necessity because of this crazy manufacturing process that I ended up doing because of having to overbuy inventory because of being in China. We had a nutty process, which was that it was the only way I could figure out to do it, which was in order to keep my prices, it was the only way I could figure out. We would buy bags. I would buy fancy fabrics at retail,
Okay.
then send them to China to make bags out of the fancy Italian fabrics and leathers and everything. And then they would ship them back to Charleston. And then we would do all the handwork in Charleston. Which is crazy, I know. But it was the only way it's what I kind of figured out to do. Because I had no manufacturing background. I didn't know what I was doing. What that would leave us with was way too many bags.
Okay.
Way too much inventory. So two things would happen with our inventory, which is going to lead into your philanthropy question. We would have these sample sales, which would be to get rid of our inventory, because you have to have constant newness all the time for the fashion world, or else they hate obsolescence. They hate that you aren't constantly new and fresh. And we took on the Children's Hospital because I didn't have money to give, because we were always poor. We started going to the Children's Hospital and making bags with the kids where they could be designers. And we'd go to the atrium and bring all of our excess supplies and bags and let the kids be designers for a day and make their own bags. And they love that better than anything. So we do it for Christmas and Mother's Day and let them just have at it. So it turned out to be not only this amazing thing that the kids loved more than anything, and they'd like purposely try and get sick right around Mother's Day and Christmas, and we'd see this huge influx of patients. all these sickle cell kids and everything be like, I'm really sick. And the nurses and everybody loved it. But it was really the glue that held my staff together, because it was such an amazing thing for the staff. So I had people who worked for me the full 12, 14 years that we were in business, and I really, really think that it was those times that held my staff together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I was watching some videos last night.
Yeah, the catwalk for
the
kids.
catwalk videos are just incredible.
Yeah.
I've seen those. Check them out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to pass it over to Daniel. I read somewhere on the internet that you had a mentor that was, I think it was the Lacoste CEO at the time? Bob. So I'm curious to know, what do you think goes into a really good mentor, and how did he help you in your own career?
Geez, that's a good question. It's funny, I called Bob today to sit, because you asked how I met him, and I couldn't remember how I met Bob, because I just feel like Bob's always been around. I was like, I think I might have stalked him at the Kiowa pool, which is creepy. And so I called him and said, Bob, how did I meet you? Did I stalk you at the Kiowa pool? I sort of have this vague memory of like following you around, and that's horrible if I did. I'm sorry. But a good mentor, I think, is someone who's there who just listens to you through the ups and downs, and will take you to lunch and let you cry on their shoulder and listen to you a lot, and provide advice, but also is hands-off at the same time when you need them to be hands-off. Bob's been hands-on and hands-off. He's provided introductions. He's put me in front of investors at times that haven't worked out, but given me the chance to pitch. Even when he knew that there was no way. I pitched to Gilbert Harrison at one point when I was tiny. I think we were at 1 million, and there's no way Financo, which was Gilbert Harrison at the time, would ever take on a little $1 million business. And Bob did it simply so I would have the experience of putting a deck together and get there in front of a big gun and pitch. And it was terrifying, because Gilbert Harrison is terrifying and has hair out his ears, and he's really scary. But Gilbert was awesome and said, you need to grow this to a bubble business to be a 2.6 at least before we'll look at or anybody will look at you, and your bottom line has to be better, and gave me great insight. And so I think a good mentor like Bob is somebody who takes you along the steps and helps you grow and doesn't push you too hard, but lets you move step to step at your own pace. Bob's been a great friend as well as a mentor.
That's a very good answer. Thank you. Okay. Daniel.
My turn.
Oh no.
So I may go off script. So Jeremy, I know you put these together, so it's all right. So how long was it before when you met with Gilbert? Did you take investment, venture investment?
Well, I grew it to a 2.6. So it did get to a 2.6 and did get in the black. So that was probably another 2 or 3 years. And funnily enough, wasn't a formal pitch by the time that came along. It was very informal, and I had met Dawn Mello, who was the woman who spearheaded the investment capital.
So you were basically operating out of Charleston,
Yes.
selling bags online, or were people locally as well? But with the celebrity endorsements, were people coming from all over the U.S.?
Well, we had the store on King Street. So we had a store on King Street online, and then we were wholesaling to probably, at that point, at least 150 accounts, including Saks, Bergdorf's, Harrods, Iseton. I mean, we were global. We were a pretty big global force at that point.
Now, do you think that was from direct selling, or do you think that was from the marketing from the celebrities?
Combination. So we would go to trade shows.
Right.
We would do New York trade shows and Paris trade shows. And they would see us, wholesale accounts would see us pretty frequently. We had a showroom in New York, our own New York showroom.
Okay.
And we were busy.
So how many people did you have?
On staff?
Right. And this is why you're growing to 2.6, correct?
Yeah. Well, we had not just our selling staff, but we also had our manufacturing staff,
Right.
because we were manufacturing in Charleston. Right. So we had a pretty big staff at that point. I couldn't even tell you.
About 20.
Probably 25. Yeah.
So what do you remember is probably the most hectic or craziest thing you had to manage during that scaling period? Just keeping it all together, holding on?
As a mom, I was a full-time mom at the same time, so I would work until the kids got off at school at 3.
Right.
And then go home and juggle 2 little kids, and that at the same time. So I think the most hectic thing was the constant guilt of
Not being able to...
not fulfilling anybody's needs.
Right.
And not being a good enough mom, not being a good enough entrepreneur, not just feeling... I would work till midnight every night, because I'd get them down and then go.
Do you think that's part of... Because I've talked to many entrepreneurs who have that same... It's what drives them a lot of times.
Yeah.
Is that not feeling like you're... Like you said earlier about the creativity. You're creative, but you don't have that. You're not sure about the entrepreneurial aspect.
Right.
I think over time, I think you were doing it right.
Yeah.
And everybody learns. I think, was there a point in that period that you felt like, I've got to take investment to be able to do it right?
Oh, yeah. I think that there were a few big factors in taking investment. One was pressure from my husband, because we had some lines of credit that were maxed, and in order to grow, I needed more.
Right.
I needed more capital.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You had a unique situation where
your success brought somebody to your doorstep in terms of offering you capital, which was a unique experience a lot of entrepreneurs don't get.
Yeah.
Which, looking back, and you and I have had these discussions before, but looking back, what would you suggest to other entrepreneurs of, one, how to attract, but also be careful?
Yeah. How to attract? I was lucky on how to attract. I don't know how I attracted it other than I think the lesson is with everything is product, product, product. I mean, you can have the best marketing, you can have the best everything in the world, but if your product is not unique, different, something totally special within the marketplace, it doesn't matter what you have. It just doesn't matter. So the one thing that I know is that, and I've become very confident with, is that I've always offered something that nobody else does. And that's why I attracted investors.
Right.
That's why I did.
I think that's important.
So whatever you do, you have to know that your product is totally different than what's in the marketplace, and do your homework. So many entrepreneurs come to me and bring me things, and I'll look quickly and find that there's something else that exists in the marketplace. And if you're not offering it at a better price or something, then you're not going to make it. You're not going to attract investors. If you do attract investors, or if you are pitching investors, then shop around. Don't just go with the first person that asks you to dance. Take your time, shop around, and no matter how great they seem or how wonderful, take your time. You know, anybody in a rush, there's a reason why they're in a rush. Don't be rushed into anything. Take your time, get to know them. Take your time. I was rushed into it, and there's a reason they rushed me into it, and that's because they didn't want me to look at the fine print. And because of that, I lost my business. And that was a shame.
Do you think that any part of that had to do with the recession? Or do you
Oh,
think that was-
absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely. I mean, there were a lot of mitigating circumstances. So, there were a lot. It was a perfect storm.
Right.
There were a lot of things that happened, and that wasn't the only one, but that was
Right.
a part.
Well,
a
the
part of
biggest.
it.
The biggest.
The biggest,
Yeah.
but there were many parts and pieces.
What would you, looking back now, having that ability to look back, what would you do different at that time, after taking the money, or during that period of raising that capital, other than what you just said now? How would you have done it a little different?
I would definitely. There's a lot of things. I would not ever. If something's working, don't. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, I would never, ever, ever let them change the name. That was. I had 8 years of brand equity in the name. That was a foolish mistake, because nobody knew who Mary Norton was. I mean, Charleston knew, but beyond Charleston, nobody knew. Not change price points, there's, the list goes on and on and on of what changed. I would never agree to working with a CEO that I haven't spent a lot of time with and have vetted very well. Because that's like a marriage. That's a marriage.
So after Moo Roo, you went on and successfully created Frosting and had success. Can you give the crowd a little bit of
knowledge on that?
So after losing, well, a lot of people, just quickly, Mary Norton folded in 2009. It was a bankruptcy, but it was a corporate bankruptcy. It was hard. I did lose everything I had built. I did lose my names, but fought back in court and did get my names back. So I do own my names and all my IP, which was great. So that's wonderful news, but hard fought. And I actually teach courses at Wharton on what not to do and how to get your names back. So don't do that. And then both QVC and HSN had expressed interest in working with me when I had Moo Roo. And so when things looked like they were going south, I jumped on the phone with both of them and ended up at HSN and developed Frosting by Mary Norton, and it was a license deal, so I got experience in licensing, which was very interesting, which was basically that I would create the designs and the product. They would have their people manufacture, and then I'd go on air and sell and get a portion of the wholesale. And it was interesting. It was the on-air was so much fun. Live TV is a blast and crazy callers, especially at that 3 a.m. hour. I love that 3 a.m. been drinking hour. Impulse buyers are a lot of fun. They're big spenders. It was interesting. 3 years on HSN is actually a long time. It's like dog years, so that's like 21 years in HSN years. It's interesting. I was actually very high priced for the HSN world. I survived 3 vice presidents and 8 buyers in my tenure there. So it's a revolving door. Mindy Grossman, the CEO there, is brilliant. She's a really, really smart person. Sadly, I didn't make it past the last VP. It was an interesting creative process, and my handbags were selling for like $4.95, so they were very expensive in the HSN realm, but did well. So it was fascinating. Licensing is fascinating. It's a whole different game.
We're coming up on the 6 o'clock hour. That was fast. But I want to ask, as we talk about Charleston and entrepreneurship in Charleston, did you have then, and do you believe now, there's kind of the support and ecosystem to support additional fashion businesses and that whole kind of ecosystem in Charleston? Did you find that was tough?
I think that's a hard question. There's not the suppliers as far as parts and pieces,
right.
as far as there's no real good fabrics and things like that, notions and all that. But now with online, it's a different world. But the problem is with fashion, you have to touch, you have to do all those things. And there's no sample makers, but that's not, for what I do, that's not even in the United States really so much. So, can there be that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. I think Charleston has a much more thriving fashion business than most towns. I mean, if you look at Charlotte or other places, this is much more thriving. It's a much bigger artisan community.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, it's a miracle that there's somebody like me that made it, that Lee Magar hats. She's been around before me, and she sells to Barney's and places like that, and she's been in existence for, there was sort of the two of us have been here a long time.
Right.
So, and I look at people like Christina Jervey, who's doing jewelry, and Deirdre Zoll, and there's Maud Couture. There's quite a few people bubbling up. So the more The biggest thing is that the community has to buy the clothes and buy the stuff, and the tourists. What I really wish is that there would be a co-op, you know, a structure that the city would support and build where tourists could come and see everybody's work in one spot.
Right.
And that there would be little workshops where they could come and see everybody work.
Right.
And where tourists could come and see everybody at work. I mean, I think it would be an amazing spot for people, and not only tourists, but local people. I think it would be a huge ticket.
Yeah.
And I've tried to approach the city with it, but kind of got laid down.
Yeah. That's
So,
a great idea.
I know.
Well,
I know it is.
Let's open it up. Any questions for Mary?
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah, besides stalking him, how did you actually convince Bob to become your mentor?
I know this is going to sound old, but it's product. He believed in my product. And so, because he believed in my product, he believed in me. And he thought that I had something unique and different to offer the fashion world.
But you met him initially by stalking him.
I met him initially by stalking him. And fortunately, he had heard of me. And he had heard of my designs. And that was, that's why he agreed to sort of let me bug him. He went even so far as at one point to put a COO on with me. That was a friend of his. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because the COO didn't want to live in Charleston. But, you know, he's been a great supporter. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What's next?
What
what's
a
on
good
the
question. I don't know. I have some things in the hopper. I mean, I'm making bags by hand right now. I'm going to do some pop-up flash sales. I'm making some, like, I have a little subline going called Moo Roo, where I love it. I take some of my archives and some vintage bags, and that are really special to me, and renew them. I call them giving old bags a new twist, like myself. And I love this new sort of venture, and I number them, and they're really, really special to me. And I'm going to do some of the Moo Roo classics and some of the Moo Roo renews, and do some pop-up sales at special places in town that I love, and do happy hours here and there, and I'll put it on my website. So those will be up and coming. I'm going to do one coming up soon. But I can only make so many bags at a time. I mean, it's just me with, like, on the dining room table again. So there are. I'll probably have about 40 or 50 bags at the sales, and that's it. So it'll be very few.
Anybody else? Well, Mary, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much. It's been great. We have some food left over.